Hello, this is going to be the 5-minute summary of the workshop that RoundTable did at NPCC on February 26th called Building a Measurement Strategy. So this workshop was about how organizations can use data to start to measure the things that are important to them organizationally. So one of the first slides that we started with was this quote from William Edwards Deming, "In God we trust, all others must bring data," which is kind of a light touch. And we gave some acknowledgments to a lot of the places where we got some of the information and some of the methodologies for this workshop, Idealware, N10, which are both phenomenal organizations, and Beth Cantor, who does all kinds of wonderful work for the nonprofit world, and then a book, Impact and Excellence by Sherry Cheney Jones, that kind of talks about creating a data-driven culture in your organization. So we talked. I'm gonna skip over the agenda because we're gonna do this so quickly. So we had people kind of line themselves up in the room and sort of decide how strongly they agreed or disagreed with these two statements. I have an excellent understanding of my organization's data and how to use it, and we had people generally disagreeing with that, but a few people that strongly agreed. And the next one is, my organization has all of the data it needs to show that its programs are effective, and there was a strong drift toward the strongly disagree on that slide. So we talked about Moneyball, and we talked about the idea of muddlehead versus simple-minded. So these terms, if you've never heard them before, which most people have not, muddle-headed, in this context, we're talking about someone who makes decisions purely based on emotion, intuition, experience, and not from data or from information. And a simple-minded person is someone who makes decisions purely based on data and information and does not include any intuition. And they're represented by the characters Brad Pitt playing Billy Bean in the movie Moneyball, based on the wonderful book, and Philip Seymour Hoffman, the dearly departed, playing the role of Art Howe as the muddle-headed in that scenario. So how do we decide what to track? So borrowing from some work that's done by Idealware and N10, we kind of started with the top-down approach, which people seem to find a little bit more difficult. So starting from an organization's mission and then identifying kind of the fuzzy terms like that don't lend themselves to being measurable. So inspire lifelong learning, connect people, alleviate poverty. These are sort of fuzzy terms that you want to start to think about how you would actually measure those kinds of things. So we worked with the audience to kind of identify tactical questions for each of those. So of these broad mission questions, how will your answer help you improve? How can your actions affect those answers? Do we need the numbers? Can we test it? And most importantly, perhaps, can we make changes based on what we learned from the data? Because if you can't, then you have to ask the harder question of why are we collecting this data? So we took a deeper dive into the New York City Public Library and their fuzzy words, and then we ran another agree. The statements this time are, my organization's data can easily be aggregated for reporting and analysis, and the other one was, I can confidently explain the difference between correlation and causation. And most people actually were pretty good about that, and we'll talk more about that later. So then we switched to the bottom-up approach, which is a lot easier, and this is straight from Idealware, so huge kudos to them for this. And so here's how we talk about that. So you measure activities, and we used throughout the workshop that we were providing as an example. So you start from our activity. So we offered a workshop as an example. All right, then the next level up is how many people came to this workshop. So at this event, it was a sold-out event, so we had the full number of 30 people that attended this workshop. So that's our participation measurement. All right, then there's initial satisfaction. At the conclusion of the workshop, we actually did send people to a survey page and actually showed everybody the measurement of, was this workshop helpful to you? Did you understand the ideas that were presented? Were these ideas things that you can take back to your organization and actually do something useful with? So that's your short-term satisfaction measurement. And then longer term is where it gets a little harder, because that would involve following up with our workshop attendees in 3 months or 6 months and trying to find out, did they actually do anything different as a result of having attended that workshop with us last week? All right. So then we had the organization brainstorm the activities across the different things. So we actually had everybody write out Post-it notes. We have a photo of that you'll see in the blog, and kind of put those up on the board in terms of activities, participation, short-term satisfaction, long-term satisfaction, and then we spent some time talking about attributable impact, which if you go back up is the top of the pyramid. Attributable impact, and you'll note the note there says requires rigorous research. Well, that's the key, and even with the rigorous research, it can be hard. So we presented the sort of holy grail here, right? So attributable impact, increase in high school completion rates, meaningful rise in organizational productivity. So thinking about that, like if an organization who attended our workshop, so we provided the workshop, that's our activity. The participation is the organization came to our workshop. The short-term satisfaction would be they found the workshop really helpful, they understood it, and they got actions they could take back to their organization. Longer-term satisfaction, let's say in 6 months, they say, yes, we actually implemented a new measurement and some new policies as a result of some things we learned in that workshop. And then a year later, they are in some measurable way a more productive organization. Could we say that that's a direct result of them attending our workshop? Well, that's clearly ridiculous, but that's in many ways what organizations are always looking for. So that's kind of a challenge. So we talked about this case study. By the way, the slide deck will be available as a link, so you can click on these links. And talked about a New York Times article that kind of walked through how carefully they were to attribute causation in the event of this really interesting thing where the Arizona State students set up a curtain of distraction. So what you're seeing is something that's behind the free throw line where they distract opposing teams who are trying to shoot free throws. We talked more about correlation versus causation, some sort of ridiculous correlations. So does the number of active Facebook users, did it cause the Greek financial collapse? Did Avas cause the U.S. housing bubble? Because as the number of babies named Ava goes up, so did the housing prices. So we kind of talked about that. Here's another one talking about people worried about cell phones causing cancer, but actually if you look at the correlation, it seems more likely that cancer caused cell phones to go up, which is obviously, again, ridiculous. So you have to be really careful with correlation was the main method. And then we talked about proxies, and proxies are one of the keys of how you get to attributable impact by looking at other research that's been done and proxying the activities that you conduct, your organization does, with those activities. So we walked through a quick example from life about an organization that Kim and I had both worked for many years ago. I'm going to kind of blaze through this, but we basically, if you look at the proxies here, so we can show that adults with mental illness regularly attend the programs, and that leads to lower hospitalization rates. And then research shows that lower hospitalization rates are positively correlated with increased psychological and physical health. So then we could proxy and say that regular attendance at our programs correlates to increased physiological, psychological, and physical health. And so that's a very quick summary of the proxy. So what does our data reveal? Attending the programs that this organization provides can lead to a greater sense of personal productivity and the kind of high-level stuff. And they actually did have a grant that was funded that was pretty. So then we worked with the organizations and we kind of, I'm sorry, I'm going to realign my slide here a little bit. Sorry. And so we determine what metrics would be helpful for the organizations. Then we did some more activities to help people think. And so what we had people think is like the data, what data is most useful to you as an organization, and then how easy is it to collect that data. And so the data that winds up in the kind of upper right-hand corner that is easy to collect and that is high use is definitely where you want to start. And then things that are of high use but maybe not as easy to collect is stuff you want to think about. How could we start collecting that? And we had everybody, again, do another exercise in Post-its. And then we started working through a data plan, which is data sources, where is all your information now? And this is an N10 workbook that's available. We'll have the link in this post. And how is the data entered into our systems? What's the incentive to ensure it's entered? Where is it stored? Who creates the metric? Who distributes it? All of those kinds of things. We have a little sample here of this workbook filled out, this kind of action plan, and we had everybody leave the workshop with this action plan for their organization, thinking about things like how frequently you're going to create the metrics, who will they be distributed to, And then we had samples of that, and then a little workbook for some immediate next steps. And again, this is lifted straight out of N10's data plan workbook. And then we just had some closing thoughts, and we kind of ended the workshop and took some questions. It was a really good time. It was about a 3-hour workshop. We'll probably be presenting it again. We definitely have some changes that we'll be making. We definitely think that it would be more useful with multiple representatives of organizations there, because I think that helps the conversations about the information. And we'll probably restructure some of the activities, but we got very positive feedback from the workshop, and again, it sold out with, I think, 30 people on the waiting list, so it definitely seems to be something that's in demand. We certainly welcome feedback on this, and please let us know if you have any questions. All right, thank you so much, and again, there'll be some links to this slide deck and some additional resources below the video. Thank you.